Welcome to this second episode of Peter Kalm's Travels in North America, sort of notes on Peter Kalm. Really a groundbreaking work from 1749, which really explains to us the New World from the eyes of somebody who was brand new to the scene. And he does some just wonderful descriptions, points out very, very interesting things. And this is the second episode right after he gets to Philadelphia, and we're going to find out about his immediate circumstances in Philadelphia and what Philadelphia is like. On my leaving London, I received letters of recommendation from Mr. Abraham Spalding, Mr. Peter Collinson, Dr. Mitchell, and others to their friends here. It was easy for me, therefore, to get acquainted. Mr. Benjamin Franklin, to whom Pennsylvania is indebted for its welfare, and the learned world for many new discoveries in electricity, was the first who took notice of me and had introduced me to many of his friends. He gave me all the necessary instruction and showed me kindness on many occasions. I went today accompanied by Jacob Bengtsson, a member of the Swedish Consistory, and the painter Gustavus Hesselius, to see the town and the fields which lay before it. The latter is the brother Reverend Messrs. Andrew and Samuel Hesselius, both ministers at Christina in New Sweden, and of the late Dr. John Hesselius in the provinces of Närke and Värmland. My new friend had followed his brother Andrew in 1711 to this country and had since lived in it. I found that I had now come into the New World. Whenever I looked on the ground, I found everywhere such plants as I had never seen before. And when I saw a tree, I was forced to stop and ask its name of my companions. The first plant which struck my eye was a andropogon, or a kind of grass. And grass is a part of botany I always delighted in. I was seized with a great uneasiness at the thought of learning so many new and unknown parts of natural history. At first, I only considered the plants without venturing a more accurate examination. At night, I took up my lodgings with a grocer who was a Quaker, and I met with very good, honest people in this house, such as most members of this faith appear to be. Youngstrom, the companion of my voyage, and I had a room, candles, beds, attendants, and 3 meals a day, if we chose to have so many, for 20 shillings per week in Pennsylvania currency. But wood, washing, and wine, if required, were extra. Now he goes on to describe Philadelphia itself, what it looks like. Imagine walking the streets of Philadelphia. The streets are regular, pretty, and most of them 50 feet, English measure broad. Arch Street measures 66 feet in breadth, and Market Street, the principal thoroughfare where the market is kept, nearly 100 feet wide. The streets which run longitudinally, or from north to south, are 7 in number, exclusive of the small one which runs along the river to the south of the market and is called Water Street. The lanes which go across and were intended to reach from the Delaware to the Schuylkill number 8. They do not run exactly from east to west, but deviate a little from that direction. All the streets, except 2, which are the nearest to the river, run in a straight line and make right angles at the intersections. Some are paved, others are not, and it seems less necessary since the ground is sandy and therefore soon absorbs the wet. But in most of the streets, it is a pavement of flags, a fathom or more broad, and laid before the houses, and 4-foot posts put up on the outside 3 or 4 fathoms apart. Those who walk on foot use the flat stones, but the riders and teams use the middle of the street. The above-mentioned posts prevent the horses and wagons from injuring the pedestrians inside the posts, and are secured from careless teamsters and the dirt which is thrown up by the horses and carts. Under the roofs are gutters, which are carefully connected with pipes, and by which means those who walk under them when it rains or when the snow melts, need not fear being wetted by the water from the roofs. The houses make a good appearance and are frequently several stories high, built either of bricks or of stone, but the former are more commonly used, since they are made near the town and are of good quality. The stone which has been employed in the building of houses is a mixture of a loose and quite small-grained limestone and of a black or gray glimmer, running in undulating veins which run scattered between the bendings of other veins which are of a gray color, excepting here and there of some single grains of sand of a paler hue. The glimmer forms the greatest part of the stone, but the mixture is sometimes of other kinds, as I shall relate below under the date of the 11th of October. This stone is now obtained in great quantities in the country, is easily cut, and is of good quality of not attracting moisture in wet weather. Very good lime is burnt whereabouts for the masonry. The houses are covered with shingles. The wood for this purpose is taken from the, and then he has the Latin name, which the Swedes here call the white juniper tree, and the English call white cedar. Swamps and morasses formerly were full of them, but at present these trees are for the greatest part cut down, and no attempt has yet been made to plant new ones. The wood is very light, rots less than any other wood in this country, and for that reason is exceedingly good for roofs, but it is not too heavy for the walls, and it will last 40 or 50 years. But many people already begin to fear that these roofs will in time be looked upon as having been very detrimental to the city. For being so very light, most people have built their houses of stone and brick, have been led to make the walls extremely thin. At present, this kind of wood is almost entirely gone, and whenever, therefore, in the process of time, these roofs decay, the people will be obliged to have recourse to heavier materials of tile or the like, which the walls will not be strong enough to bear, and the roof will therefore require more support, or the people be obliged to pull down the walls and build new ones, or to take other steps for securing them. Several people have already in late years begun to make roofs of tiles. So we've got three quick points here that I wanted to touch on. And the first is the idea that he comes with letters of introduction. And if you really wanted to make inroads when you came into a new area in the 17th or 18th century, you came with letters of introduction. People in another country, people that already knew the folks that you were going to see, they would vouch for your character. You didn't want to just show up in a new area with absolutely no letter of introduction. Nobody had any idea whether you were trustworthy or not. And he comes with letters of introduction from people in medicine and science from England to introduce him to people in North America that were in that same area of expertise. He wants to immediately be introduced to people who have sort of scientific thought, because that's why he's coming to North America in the first place. Isn't it truly amazing that he gets almost immediately introduced and he interacts with Benjamin Franklin? It's like he's stepping right out of history and talking to someone that we know so well from our history books. The so famous Benjamin Franklin, and here he is, he's chummy with him, they're friends right away, they're probably talking, interesting scientific ideas. He doesn't spend a lot of time, telling us exactly what kind of conversations he has with Benjamin Franklin, but he certainly is getting shown the ropes. Benjamin Franklin tells him who to ask questions of and what kind of information he's going to be able to find out, what sort of things are going to be very, very interesting to him. So he immediately makes contacts with the scientific community here in North America. The most famous scientist here in North America he gets immediate connections to. He came to the right city. It's probably why he sailed directly to Philadelphia in the first place. Then we find out what his lodgings are like. He rents a room in the house of a grocer, a Quaker grocer, which we're in Pennsylvania, so there are a lot of Quakers here. He gets his his board, his room, his food, candles, washing, all that good stuff for 20 shillings in Pennsylvania money per week. I'm not sure if that was partially because he was, rooming with a friend or how that exactly worked, but, 20 shillings a week. And then, if you want extras, then, you'll pay a little bit more. What were the extras here? He says, but if we wanted wood, washing, or wine, it was extra. So very, very, very interesting that we find out about his room and board immediately. He's going to take the time to tell us about that. And then he digs into Philadelphia itself. I skipped over sort of the location, the geography of Philadelphia, but went right to what does it look like? He's walking down the streets of Philadelphia. What does he find most interesting? How are the streets laid out? Well, they're stone on the sidewalks, basically, and sort of dirt in the center. And then they have it's interesting that they have sidewalks particularly, and they have posts to keep the horses or whatnot running off of the sidewalk and smashing into people. And they have overhangs on the roof and gutters to keep the water from, just turning the whole thing into a mud pit. So really, it seems like it's a lot nicer than I would have guessed the streets. Of course, this is Philadelphia, one of the sort of biggest and finest cities in North America at the time. So it's a very, very nice place to visit, and he seems to think it's well laid out and with nice, wide, broad streets. Imagine a street 100 feet wide enough so that you can put a market in the middle of it. Very interesting. We don't think about putting necessarily markets in the middle of our city, sort of make sure the street is wide enough so that we can have a big, flea market right here in the middle of the city. And then he goes to describe the houses, the kind of stone they're built with, or the brick, and we find out that they have a thriving brick industry, and they're quarrying very, very interesting, it sounds like very pretty stone to use for the houses. And then let's talk about the shingles. What's going on with the roofs? The roofs here are obviously different from the roofs he's used to in Sweden or Finland, and they're made of this white cedar tree. And they're very light. They last quite a while, but hey, that's a problem. If you're used to roofing with a very light roof and you need to change materials, then something's going to happen. And are the buildings going to be able to support that? Very interesting. Wouldn't it be neat to study further into the future here and find out what happened with that? Was that a problem or not? And these white cedar logs, we find out later on that these white cedars, even though they had harvested all these white cedars and there weren't any to find that were standing, later on we find out that many of these had fallen into the swamps, maybe not in this book, but in other circumstances. They had fallen into the swamps and had settled down into the swamps, and for literally decades or almost a century, these sodden logs were brought up, and they still hadn't rotted under the water. It actually preserved them. And even though new cedars weren't growing, they continued to harvest these cedars out of the swamps and from underwater and use them as shingles for decades. So well into the 19th century. Even though he's talking about them disappearing here in the 1750s, they were still being used off into the future, even though a lot of people, sounds like, had already started to shift their roofing materials. It's like we had a time machine and we were able to step into it, transport ourselves back in time 270 years. We walk out of the machine and we are on the streets of Philadelphia, 1748. How am I going to describe this to my friends back at home in 2021? Well, Peter Kalm does it for us. Such a great book, so much to cover. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you join us on this next episode where we dig into more Peter Kalm, 1748. I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching.